Toby, you crazy. Toby, you crazy. Toby, you crazy. Toby, you crazy. Bougiewild, 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 Bougiewild. I said the universe gave it to me. I said the universe gave it to me. Bougiewild, 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 Bougiewild. I said the universe gave it to me. I said the universe gave it to me. Bougiewild can't be boxed. I'm free to be me. I'm living life, creating legacy. I'm living my dream. They call me extra. They say I'm doing too much. I'm just bougie wild. Cause I'm classy with some style. Bougie wild, 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 bougie wild. I said the universe gave it to me. I said the universe gave it to me. Bougie wild, 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 bougie wild. I said the universe gave it to me. I said the universe gave it to me. I'm rocking my own label. I'm wearing my own brand. See, y'all don't understand that this shit was never planned. Some call me bougie, some call me wild. The funny. Hello and welcome to another episode of Transparent Table Talk. Transparent Table Talk is a platform where people are willing to speak about their personal life from a humble, transparent, and vulnerable place. The purpose of this show is to bring awareness to topics society does not discuss that have people suffering in silence due to shame and blame. The vision is to create a place for people to have conversations without fear of judgment. And the reason this show was created because these are conversations I wish someone would have had with me. The goal is to inspire and empower people to know that they have a choice to live a happy life. Because the mission is to heal this hurt world by showing people that we all go through the same things and that we have a choice to be reborn and live in the spirit. Welcome again today. I am your host, Bougiewild. Let's introduce our guest for tonight, Miss Paige Park. Paige Park helps people who have been impacted by grief find themselves in their lives again. Her story began 10 years ago with the finalization of a divorce, followed by the death of both parents and a brother. These events shook her core, taking her on a deep journey of self-discovery. After yoga teacher training, she began to help others who had experienced grief. Let's welcome Miss Paige Park to Transparent Table Talk. Hello, Paige.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Tonight's episode is titled The Beauty of Grief. Paige, what brought you to Transparent Table Talk?
Well, I wanted an opportunity to share my story and to let others who might be grieving know that they are not alone and their feelings are not unrecognized, and that it's natural and normal, and to normalize that conversation a little bit more.
Yes. So you are the second person that's been on Transparent Table Talk talking about grief. And let me just say, I appreciate you all for coming forward and talking about this topic because this is something that we don't talk about every day. And I learned so much from my first guest that talked about grief. So tell us about your grief and what you experienced to kind of help us understand from your perspective what grief is like.
Okay. Well, I experienced grief on a couple of different levels. It started with a divorce, which sometimes people just think when they say grief, they think about death, but it's more than death. Like you can experience grief in any sort of a transition or change. The big grief started with the divorce. It started with this identity crisis and not knowing who I was anymore as a wife and a stepmom. And having to like re-examine myself and my beliefs and who I was, and having to kind of go back in and re-identify that. And in the middle of that, 5 months after my divorce was finalized, my mother was diagnosed with a glioblastoma multiforme, which is a very aggressive form of brain cancer. And she went through surgery, and 9 months from the date of her surgery, she died. 9 months later, she passed away. In the meantime, my dad had been diagnosed prior to my mom's diagnosis a few years before with Parkinson's. And so, when mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor and started declining, my brothers and I then became the caregiver for my father. So there's grief in caregiving for our parents, which isn't often discussed. And that, when somebody gets some sort of a terminal diagnosis, that anticipatory grief of like what happens before they die and then what happens after. And then 2 years after my mother passed away, my father passed away. And then 2 years later, my oldest brother passed away.
Wow. So you experienced a lot of grief. So let's talk about each one individually, because I want to make sure the audience understand, like you said, that there are different types of grief. Yeah. The first thing you mentioned was the divorce. Correct. And let me just say, I can relate to you on that because I was married too. And when we divorced, I understand what you mean, because that once I had no longer exists anymore. Yeah. And so, the average person look at it like, oh, you just went through a divorce, rather than realizing, no, this is something that was real to me, that existed and no longer exists anymore. And I had to do a lot of reading to get through the stages of the process of going through divorce. But I'm going to allow you to explain, what was it like for you to go through the divorce, like to kind of give that person that's listening insight, so they could probably be like, oh, okay, I've experienced this.
Yeah. For me, I had lost myself in my marriage. I became a completely different person. And I lost my identity and who I was. As women, sometimes we experience that. It's more common for women than it is for men. Not that a man can't, he can. But I just in my conversations with people, I find it much more common in women. So I lost myself. I lost who I was and what I stood for in that. And so it started as this journey of who am I? Who am I in this world? Who am I to stand on my own and not be in a partnership anymore? Who am I as I present myself to the world as a single woman? And how does that impact the people around me, or how can I impact the people around me in a positive way? Because some of what I had lost sight of is I had, as my younger self, had a personal mission to help and work with teenagers. And I lost that along the way. I still am a classroom teacher, but I lost some of that working with kids voluntarily in my marriage, because that was a huge part of who I was. And so it was a rediscovery of just all of me, and finding my voice again, because I'd lost my ability to speak myself and to speak my truth. And I have this one memory that just stands out to me. It was before the divorce was final, but after the separation. I was shopping at the grocery store around the holidays, and there was some music playing, and singing had always been a huge part of my life. And all of a sudden I started humming as I'm going through the grocery store to the song with whatever was playing over the speaker. I had forgotten to
Mm-hmm.
sing. I had lost my voice and myself, and I'd stopped singing somewhere along the line. And that moment, I knew everything was going to be okay. I was going to rediscover myself, because I'd found my voice to sing again.
Yes. And I can relate to that because as women, like you said, you know, we are conditioned in a
Yeah.
sense to conform to what it is that the world see us and how the world see us. And then especially when we get in relationships, we want to feel accepted, and that's something that we don't talk about openly, that we leave as young adults going out in the world seeking validation and fear of rejection. So then we find ourselves conforming and changing and forgetting who we are
Mm-hmm.
just to fit in. And so I can relate as a fellow woman, like you said. um it seems like from my experience, it's like the woman is the glue to hold everything together. We are the ones that, you know, take all of it and just try to keep it together regardless
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on. And in the midst of that, we lose ourselves because our focus be more so on the family than it is on self. Just in, and then especially with society, because I just like to make it clear in these conversations in society, we don't want to be us. I'm 45 years old. I didn't want to be single. You
Right.
know, I didn't want to be a single woman. So we suppress and we take and we wait and we hope that one day it's just going to fall into that fairy tale that
Mm-hmm.
every woman imagines that they're gonna have in their marriage. So I can relate to you as well. After my divorce, I asked myself, why did I go through that? Like I used to say that all the time. Why did I stay so long? Why did I
Right.
go through that? And I had
Yes.
a
I hear
I had a
you.
revelation,
Yes.
and you know, I did. I When I tell you, Paige, after my divorce, every day I used to sit up. God, why did I go through that? Why did I take that for so long? Why did I deal with that? And I too had lost myself. I too didn't know who I was because I was so busy living through the family. And I realized I was in love with my family, not the man.
Yeah.
I was in love with the whole, you know, the family unit. Like,
The idea. I was in love with the idea of the relationship, not the man.
right. Not
I
the
was,
man.
and I was older when I got married. I was not
Mm-hmm.
older, but I was 33, I think, 32, 33
Mm-hmm.
when we got married. I was older than most of my friends. Let me put it that way. When he and I married, and it's like I felt that pressure of you're in your childbearing years, and I never had any children with this man, so I had to grieve that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's like you're in your childbearing years, and I wanted to have kids. I was one of those people who
Mm-hmm.
I wanted children. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like the clock is ticking. It's time to settle down and get married and have a family. And I felt that pressure deeply as a young 30-year-old.
Right.
And then I was 42. We were married for 10 years. I was like 42, 43 when we divorced. And then by the time um, we settled my parents' estate and we settled my brother's estate, I was almost 50.
I understand. Understand. Right. Right. But like you said, that whole idea and what our vision is for our life, we sometimes tolerate and deal. And then for me, it was fear. It was fear
Mhm.
of starting over, you know, and realizing after the fact that, oh my God, I had to deal with regret on my part, that I knew it for years, but my fear kept me there.
Yeah.
And it was like forcing something, in which I've learned, and I tell my children and I tell anybody that'll listen, never try to force something that doesn't fit. You can't take a triangle and put it in a square uh frame, you know. And it was like I
Uh-huh.
was trying to do that for all those years, And just to share with you, so you can have some insight, because I do like to share my life with people. That's the reason why I created this show, because we feel like we go through things alone. I had 2 children by my ex-husband, and the whole time it was chaotic, it was discord, it was conflict, to where after my divorce, and I had asked God for so long, why did I go through it? It was because my childhood, I was raised around chaos. I was raised around in a dysfunctional home. And when God showed me that, I said, "Oh my God, I've done it to my children." So just imagine divorcing and then having major children dysfunctional. So I had that after he left, I then had to deal with these 2 dysfunctional children that we created.
Mm-hmm.
A boy and a girl, they're 2 years apart. They were mimicking mom and dad. They were now having the chaos and the conflict. They were acting like us, because that's what we created the house to be, as the norm. And when I had that revelation, I was like, "Oh my God, these are things that we need to talk about," because as a society, we are now shamed when we do these things, and now our children are suffering with it. And then we grow up and say, "We don't know what's wrong with Eric, and I don't know what's wrong with Harmony," instead of saying, "Oh, this went
Wait,
on in the household."
yeah, we created this, but we can
And
also
I had to
uncreate it.
apologize to my children and address it.
Yeah,
Yes,
I would say
yes,
we
I
can
did. That's what
uncreate it.
that's what I did.
We can create new
Yes,
pathways. We just
yes.
have to recognize what you did,
Mm-hmm.
recognize where it came from, and then I love
Right,
that you said you apologize to your children. That's so beautiful.
right,
And then
right,
reteach them, hey, here's
right,
this isn't normal. This is I hate the
right.
word normal. I don't know why I used it. This isn't right. Let's do it this way. This is
And,
chaotic.
and and I
Let's try a
understand
calm
why you
way.
hate the word normal, because society want to make normal. What is normal?
It doesn't
What
exist.
is
It
it
doesn't
doesn't.
exist. It doesn't exist. That's why I don't like the word normal.
It because what's normal, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a pet peeve of mine. When people say, "Oh, that's not of the cultural norm or the social norm," like, what is
Who
that?
cares?
Like,
Can I just be my
how are
bright,
you gonna put
shining, beautiful self and you be your bright, shining, beautiful self?
Exactly, exactly. So, in relation to this grief, I really do understand. And, I want the audience to understand that it is a process, that when you go through a divorce, um, it's like someone has died. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is.
No.
Your marriage died, for one
Yeah, I
thing.
would say the relationship, the marriage dies.
The
Absolutely.
marriage
Yeah.
died, and it's a process. And then, like you said, as a woman, we have to take that time and get to know ourselves, because we unknowingly conform. It's like we do.
Well, and society conditions us that self care is selfish,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not. Because you cannot give from an empty cup. If you do not fill yourself up, you cannot give to those around you. You've got to fill yourself up first. Then you can give. And society has conditioned us that if we don't give and give and give and give and give to our family, that we're being selfish.
I'm glad you said it, because it took me to learn that. Paige, I had my first
Me
child
too.
I was pregnant at 14 years old. And I
Oh,
have I have a 30-year-old, I have a 28-year-old, I have an 18-year-old, and I have a 15-year-old. And I had to learn that in 2022, the Holy Spirit said, "Yolanda, it's time to give yourself what you've been giving everybody else."
mhm.
I never learned until recently how to love Yolanda. So,
Yolanda, I learned recently how to love Paige. So I am with you there, sister.
yes, yes. And because society conditioned us that we're supposed to seek validation and make everybody else on the outside okay for our approval, you
Right.
know. um we walk around suffering in silence. We walk
Hmm.
around suffering in silence because, for one thing, we are seeking our approval on the outside for the spirit that's already in us. Number one, you
Hmm.
know, the spirit that's in us, through us, as us, they teach us to go seek God on the outside, and not teaching us that the love that we need is in us, that the energy that's in us, through us, as us, we already possess. So
Yes.
I was like, just think, Paige, if we were taught from children the power that lies within us. And this is something that I'm discovering, that I'm sharing with a lot of people. And you can go back and look through the shows. It seems like, regardless of whatever the topic is, this is the common thing that the guests have experienced, that we all are coming together to say, I've experienced, it's in me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize, because I've been looking for it on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we
Love
talked
that.
about the grief you experience with losing your marriage,
Yes.
with losing yourself, with
Yeah.
losing yourself. Um, and
Yeah.
that's something that, as a society, like you said, that I want more people to understand that there's power in our choices. We don't realize that the power that possessed within us is the power of our choice. And our choice is to love ourselves. Like, it took me a long time to get here. I have
It
not
did.
always been here.
Yeah.
So, what is self-love like? Let's talk about that. What does
Let's talk about that.
self-love
I feel like self-love
mean
is
to you,
different.
Paige?
I feel like it's different for everybody. Self-love for me is honoring
Okay.
my body where I am, honoring my choices. I'll have a friend
Mhm.
who'll message me, "Hey Paige, we're doing da 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 tonight. You want to come?" And I'll have this, I do. And then I think, no, I really don't. So it's
Mhm.
honoring that. And my friend is so sweet. She's always like, I said, well, not this, but I'll do this. Or like, I'll give her, because sometimes there's a couple of different things going on. Well, I'm not going to do this thing that's going on, but I'll do this other thing that's going on.
Right.
Or, and honoring that time of rest, and whatever rest looks like for you. It could be going for a walk out in nature, because sometimes that's rest for me, is getting
Right.
outside and going for a walk. Sometimes rest is lighting some candles and making myself a lovely meal and just enjoying that. Um, Sometimes rest is curling up with a book. Sometimes rest is taking a class and doing some learning. It just depends. Sometimes
And,
rest is getting a massage. Sometimes rest
right.
is yoga class.
Right. And basically, what I'm hearing you say is knowing who I am and what it is I
Mm-hmm.
want, and my power
Yeah.
and my choice. That I have a choice. I don't have to please anybody. I
No,
have to make sure that this spirit in me is okay. Making sure
exactly.
that I am aligned at all times with my spirit, instead of doing things to make others okay while my spirit is not in line. And that's the thing that I had to learn too. Setting those boundaries for Yolanda, self-discipline for Yolanda. Like I tell people, self-love is not, for me, it's not all about, just taking that the loving on me, but self-love is actually knowing, okay, Yolanda, what it is that keep you in a line with your spirit, what it is that you're okay with, and that's those boundaries. Like keep I talk about the little voice in my head that nobody hears, that nobody talks about.
I love it. You got to
That,
keep the voice in your head happy, right? And that's how you keep yourself happy. And that's how you keep yourself filled and full. And then you can go and give and do and yeah, then you can go and give and do.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So yes, it is beauty in grief. The beauty
It
of
is.
grief is, I tell, from what I've learned in my life, growth hurts.
Oh, yeah. That's the only way it is growth.
Growth hurts. And I speak so humble, so transparent and vulnerable about life, so that I won't suffer in silence. And that's the reason why I created this platform, because I suffered in silence for years and not having anyone to have conversations. And as a 45-year, I'll be 46 this year, Paige. I was like, why adults didn't talk about this type of thing?
Right? I'll be 53 in a couple of months. And it's like, why have we not had these conversations most of my life? Why did we not talk about the impact of grief and loss and death? Why don't we? My grandmother passed away when I was younger. Actually, all of my grandparents passed away when I was younger. But I wasn't very close to them, so their deaths weren't very impactful on me like they were on my parents. But my parents didn't talk about the impact of that. They didn't talk about how they had to learn to live with the grief. My mom and I were tight. We were close. And so, when she passed away, I lost my friend. Not just my mom, she was my friend.
Right.
And that was so impactful on my life. And it's been 9 years and I still miss her every day. It's different now than it was when it first happened. But also, I was taking care of my dad when my mom first passed away. So it was balancing that impact of, that balance of, okay, well, I'm grieving, but also I have to, take dad to this appointment and do this. And he was in the middle of some issues physically. He had an infection that wouldn't go away. And so we were seeing specialists and going to we had lots and lots and lots of doctor's appointments. And so there were occasions where that grief would like bubble up and I was like, down, I don't have time for you right now.
Right.
And I did that enough.
Get an opportunity to really grieve.
Right.
The process, go through the grieving process.
And I don't know if this has been your experience at all, but my experience has been that when I shoved grief down, it would come back up later, but it wouldn't necessarily come up as emotion. It would come up as some sort of a physical ailment.
Wow. Yes. Have you ever listened to Louise Hay when she talk about, we're nothing but balls of energy, right?
Right.
And like you said, if you don't get to express it and you're holding it in, yes, it will it can attack our joints. It can become, like you said, illness. There's a book I'm reading right now, The Game of Life and How It's Played.
I haven't read that one.
Pardon me?
I haven't read that, but I have read The Body Keeps, well, not all of, but I've read a lot of The Body Keeps Score.
Yes. And in that book, that's what she talks about, even resentment, even bitterness, all of those energies, being angry, that all of those things that you harbor in your body can take toll on your body. And, it create illnesses. And it's something, again, that we don't have conversations about.
No.
That we can sit back and reflect and relate to on different people's lives. And if a person's very honest and open about it, we can correlate and see where it happened. Because there was a young lady who reached out to me. I talk to a lot of people on like social media, and I'm just, because I speak from a humble, transparent, and vulnerable place, a lot of people come to me and we talk about life. And this lady was battling cancer. And she was like, I really believe I'm dealing with this. She said, because I've been so angry. She was like, I have been so angry. And she said I think her admission was just like a relief of, I've been dealing with this anger. And that's something that, we have to discuss, because in grief, in any type of grief, whether it's us, going through losing, our marriage, we go through the anger, we go through the sadness, we go through, it's like different stages of it that we go through. And then I'm sure the same way when you lose a loved one, you just go through different stages.
Well, and there's so many different emotions that go along with it. And emotion, we have as a society, as a culture, we have, or cultures, we have labeled emotions good and bad, and they're not. They're just emotion. It's just feeling. Anger is not a bad thing. Sometimes how we place our anger cannot necessarily be positive, but anger in and of itself isn't bad. It's how we express it and allowing it to express and dissipate. Which is what emotions were made to do. We weren't made to hang on to them and hold that feeling for a long period of time. It was made to move through us.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, like now, if I'm dealing with something, I'll go and take a walk, or try to get it out. Or if I have to go scream, I'll scream. I'm a crybaby though. I'm a crier.
I'm a crier too.
I
cry.
cry in a minute. Like,
Sometimes screaming sometimes helps too. Like,
yeah.
But that expression of, you're expressing it when you scream. You're expressing it when you cry. You're using, especially for women, you're using your voice, which is powerful. And the more we do that, the more impactful it becomes.
Yeah. It's like you said, we need to have those conversations more, so that people will feel comfortable expressing their emotions, because we do live in a society where when you express your emotions, we get criticized and condemned. Like, I've noticed that some people, when they cry, they'll say, I'm gonna stop crying, I'm gonna stop crying. I'm like, I cried. And like when I was going through my healing phase, I used to get on Facebook and have these conversations with Live, and I'm like, just talking about life from a humble, transparent. I'm like, did anybody else experience this? And I would be crying, because what I realized is I was conditioned, based on my environment, my experience, and my exposure, growing up in a uneducated poverty mindset. And when I realized that a lot of my decisions was as a result of the conditioning, me being angry, me being hurt, being frustrated, having low self-esteem. And when I had my awakening, I would just cry. Like, I cried for like 2 years. It took me like 2 years to overcome what I realized occurred. Like, when I realized, oh my God, I got pregnant at 14. Like, as an adult.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I sit and I thank God that I'm able to talk about these things, because I did deal with regret. I dealt with, at one point, regret almost took me out. Like, oh my God, I messed my life up. Oh my God, I messed my motherhood up. Like, I would have been a different mother. I would have did this different. I would have did this different. And then the Holy Spirit said, well, you got to forgive yourself, Yolanda. And so that's the reason why I created Transparent Table Talk page, because I was like, if people would have had these type of conversations, and help us understand as children that we're going to go through things. And just because you go through things, don't allow it to conform you. Don't allow it to make that your image on how you see life and your perspective. Because, our perspective at the time is our reality, right?
Right.
And so, creating Transparent Table Talk is that platform that I wish someone would have had conversations with me as a little girl, understanding that your environment, your experience is not the life that you have to live.
Right.
And, growing up in that, with those type elements around.
I have this conversation with some of my students.
Yes.
And your life doesn't have to be your circumstances. When you grow up, you can change it. You have people around you to support you. You have people around you who will give you the validation that you seek from your family, but aren't getting. There are other ways to get it within yourself, but also as teenage girls struggle with getting it from within themselves. So right. you have adults around you who will help lift you up and support you in that journey of creating a different path for yourself and for your life. And it's possible. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible to break through that.
Yep. And it's the conditioning. The hardest thing to reprogram, Paige, is what I realize is the mind.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I'm
so
still working on mine. Like I work on mine every day,
yes.
all day,
Yeah.
to overcome what was programmed.
Yeah.
And you know, ultimately that is my ultimate desire, is to get in schools and talk to the children who experience what I experienced, to let them know that it is possible. Those are conversations we're not having with children, where somebody is willing to come and say, I went through this as childhood. I went through this. My mom said this. Just today I was at a in a virtual conference with the SBA, and they're with it being Women's Month, and they had this program, and they were talking about entrepreneurs, because I'm an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And they was like, they said ultimately it takes confidence. And I have not always had this confidence that I have. And I was like, that's exactly what it takes, because in 2021 I walked away from my 20-year job. I used to be a previous IRS agent, and I walked away from my job because I was like, I know who I am. After my awakening, I cried, and I was like, I became an IRS agent and got an accounting degree out of survival. Like, I had 2 kids by the time I was 17, was a high school dropout, and went out in the world, been on my own since I was 15, and started working for the IRS, saw an opportunity, and I realized the IRS raised me, and I'm grateful. But I was like, I did this not even knowing who I was. So now that I know who I am, I'm now out in the world creating the life I want
I
based
hear
on knowing what.
that. Yeah, I am out in the world. Haven't left my day job just yet. But I
Yeah.
am out in the world creating a different life for myself. One that, as a kid growing up, I didn't grow up in poverty, so I don't have that perspective. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up in an entrepreneurial middle class family. My dad had his own business for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny, as a people pleasing, I call myself a reformed people pleaser. As a people pleasing young teenager, and I did enjoy education also. Like, I had some experiences. I went to my father's alma mater in college
Mm-hmm.
and majored in my mother's major. So talk about people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
To some degree, and I've loved it for years, but also it's time for things to begin to change and shift in that area.
Understand. Understand. And I too am a previous people pleaser. I actually did a episode about people pleasing, just sitting there explaining to people and sharing my experiences of what I went through, people pleasing with a smile on the outside, looking to make everybody else happy when I'm crying on the inside and feeling
Right.
bad.
Yeah, so
Took
much.
me a long time to get here. Like I said, like
Yeah, me
now,
too.
where when I start loving on myself, everybody thought I was crazy. Like, for real. They was like, you're the problem. You're the problem. And one day I said, I am the problem, because I now love myself. So it took me a long time to
I
get
love
here.
that.
Jeez.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
I mean, it is. You know, speaking our truth, that's the reason why transparent table talk, speaking from this humble, transparent, and vulnerable place, is healing.
It
It's
is
healing.
so healing. So healing. Well, and it's using, and that's one of the things that I do is I give people space to express and experience grief. I'll have clients come in and they'll start apologizing for crying. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cry. I'm like, cry. This is the place for it. When you go out there, you may be shamed, but in this space, this is a brave space. You are allowed to cry. Nobody is going to shame or judge you, and if they do, I'm going to ask them to leave.
Right. Right. And like you said, the conditioning, and not realizing, I look at crying the same way I look at rain. No rain, no flowers. Like,
Right? You got to go through the depths in order to come out the other side. Like the coating, I've read this thing, the coating of the seed. Like, seeds have this like innate coating inside them.
yes,
And
yes,
the only way for them to grow is to be planted and fertilized and in the dirt and in the soil. And that's what releases those seed, the codes within the seed that allows it to grow and then allows the flower to bloom. You cannot have light without dark. You cannot have
Sun without rain.
expression, right? You
Yes.
cannot have sun without rain. You cannot have flowers 24/7, 365. They do not always constantly bloom.
Nope.
They've
And
got to have that
understanding
time.
that
Yeah.
we go through different seasons, just like winter, spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah.
We have rain, we have the sunshine. Like today was one of those days where I was just like, okay, this is a day that it was just like, to me it was raining everywhere, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna let it rain today. It was just different stuff that went on today.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happens like that, I don't force against it. Okay, this is a rainy day.
Yeah.
This is a rainy day.
And that's okay. There's going to be rainy days in life, physically and internally, mentally. And
Yeah.
if we don't have the rain, we don't have that cleaning and cleansing, and we
Right.
can't bloom.
Right.
You can't fully experience the joy of life without having lived in the grief.
Mm-hmm.
If everything is always happy and joyous, then you don't appreciate it and you don't know what it's like. To really experience life, you have to have experienced the grief and the sadness.
Right.
And grief is that wake-up call. And I love that you keep talking about your awakening, because grief is that wake-up call, that awakening that, hey, yo, are you just going through the motions? Or are you really living? And what's it going to take to get you to be really living?
Yeah. I realized this energy. I tell people, I said, when I had my awakening, because it was like, the book I'm reading, they talk about soulful sleeping, and I can relate to it before I had my awakening. I was just like programmed, and I was conditioned, and I was living from that subconscious place, and I wasn't aware of my decisions and aware of my, and now, oh, he's fine. He's fine.
Okay.
This table talk. Look. Look. So and becoming aware put me in a place where I realized this energy that moves my fingers, that moves my mouth, that blinks my eyes, it's gonna leave one day.
Yeah.
It's gonna leave. So that made me realize that I have to face my fears. That's insecurity. I have to create the life I want, because it's all about time and energy and living in the now page. Like, I've learned to live in the now and be grateful. Like, because I left, I come from poverty, and I speak very openly about this, because this is something society don't talk about, that a lot of us come from poverty that we deal with. When we come from poverty, we're not used to anything. We're always chasing. We're never content. And I am finally content with the now. Hello. How adorable. Hello. He like, I want to be on Transparent Table Talk.
She does. She is fierce and ferocious and my eternal companion right now.
Hello. It's like, you on that too long. You giving them too much attention.
Right?
But that's what it is. But that's what I realized. This spirit, the same spirit that's in your baby, what's her name?
Pickles.
Sprinkles.
Pickles.
Pickle. Oh, that's cute. Pickles. Hey, Pickles. But yeah, that's what I realized, is that this energy that's in us is gonna leave one day.
Yeah.
It's gonna leave. And so, like, just thinking about, like you said, the beauty of grief is understanding that we have to treasure every moment, that our time and energy is valuable. Like I ask people, what is this? This is nothing. This is nothing. It's what moves this, what blinks our eyes.
Yeah. It's our skin
You,
suit.
you know, you know. So yes. So let me ask you this. If you could have that conversation with a person that's experiencing grief,
Yep.
that's going through it, what would that conversation be, Paige?
Just allow it to come, allow it to be, and know that the more you face and experience the grief, the more there's a graphic out there, and I just absolutely love it. It's like a ball in a jar, and it says the grief doesn't change, you do. You grow around the grief. And so it has like a ball that's the grief, and it's the same size in each picture, but the jar is bigger. Your
Mm.
capacity to hold it grows. Your capacity to allow it to transform your life in a beautiful way grows. Now, you can also wallow. I prefer not to look at it that way. Um, but allowing it to change you and to transform you and to be that wake up call of, hey, I'm just going through the motions of life. And I remember my brother and I um, had so many conversations about the frailty of life and the shortness of life as we were going through this with our parents. And we both said, now is the time to do the things that we've always wanted to do while we can still do them. There were things that my parents had wanted to do and they kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and didn't do it. And so my brother and I both, I don't know exactly how, he's committed to doing things that he's always said, hey, I want to do this. He wanted to dive with sharks. He went to go dive with sharks. I made a commitment to experience or travel or do something new at least once a year, if not more. So go someplace new, experience something new, go to a different culture, make new friends, like do something just different to kind of push myself out of that comfort zone every year. And so my life is richer for it, for having that, oh wait, grief came knocking, life is short, let's begin to do things and get off that Ferris wheel and onto our own shining star.
Mm-hmm. 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 That's great advice. That's great advice, because we have to live. We have to live. And my next question is, what is that conversation that you wish someone would have had with you about grief?
That feeling is normal, that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be angry. There is no appropriate emotion for grief. Allow it to be and experience it when it comes up. Let it move through your body. Everyone experiences grief, even though they don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great advice. Great conversation to have with someone. I thank you so much for coming on Transparent Table Talk and sharing your personal information with us from a humble, transparent, and a vulnerable place. Because our goal is to show people that we all go through things in life that's similar and the same, and that
Yeah.
we have a choice. It's all about our choice on how we look at it. And like you said today, the beauty of grief to help you self-discover, help you realize that, you know what, let me get to living, let me get to do these things that I've been putting off. Let me love on myself. Let me love myself without allowing myself to feel like I have to please everybody else. Let me put myself first and fill this cup. Because like the Bible say, give what's running over.
Yeah.
We got to be feel first. So thank you
Do.
again so much. I
Thank you so
I
much
have
for having
really
me.
enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. So much fun.
Yes, thank you so much. And you enjoy your beautiful evening.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Pickles. I like that name, Pickles. I'm free to be me, it's what you see in my energy. I'm real with myself, I don't conform to society. I'm free to be me, it's the only way for me to stay true to my identity. I'm free to be me, I'm a person of integrity.